I never imagined I'd be the type of woman who'd rewrite her will over a single snide remark. But when my daughter-in-law, Victoria, looked me dead in the eye and told me I was too shaky to hold my own granddaughter, while my son, Daniel, stood there in silence, something inside me cracked. Not with a shout or tears, but with a quiet, chilling clarity I hadn't felt in years. The trust fund I had spent decades building, one meant to secure Emma's future, suddenly felt like the last thread of control I had left. So, I changed it. And I didn't say a word to anyone, not until it was too late for anyone to talk me out of it. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. The day began like any other Thursday in Lakeside, with the fresh scent of spring in the air. The cherry trees were blooming, their petals falling like delicate snowflakes, and the lake sparkled in the distance. As I prepared my basket, filled with freshly baked lemon scones and homemade strawberry preserves, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Thursday had become a ritual, a weekly visit to Daniel and Victoria's home in the Pines neighborhood. The chance to see my 6-month-old granddaughter Emma always filled my heart, but it also meant enduring Victoria's thinly veiled criticisms and my son's uncomfortable silence. I had spent over 30 years as the head librarian in our small town before retiring 3 years ago. My hands, once steady and sure, had begun to show signs of age. A slight tremor now appeared from time to time, nothing serious, according to my doctor. It was likely a side effect of the blood pressure medication I had started the year before, but Victoria didn't see it that way. She often reminded me, with her condescending tone, that I was getting older and should slow down. It stung, but I had learned to bite my tongue, especially for Emma. I approached their sleek modern house with the usual unease. Everything inside was immaculate, furniture too stiff to sit on, abstract art that probably cost more than my car, and carpets so white they made me nervous. "In the kitchen, Mom," Daniel called when I let myself in with the key he had given me when Emma was born. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone, with Emma awkwardly cradled in one arm. He barely looked up as I set down the basket and washed my hands. "She's been fussy this morning," Daniel said, his voice distant. "Victoria was up half the night with her." I nodded, a flash of memories flooding back. "I remember those nights," I said, drying my hands. "You used to wake up every 2 hours, like clockwork. Your father could sleep through a hurricane, so it was always me walking the floors with you." Daniel gave a distracted nod, his eyes never leaving his phone. It was as if he didn't hear me, or perhaps didn't care. Gregory, my ex-husband, had been a surgeon whose career always took precedence, leaving me to raise Daniel on my own. After 20 years of marriage, he left me for one of the nurses in his practice. At least he had the decency to wait until Daniel was in college before he left. "Can I hold her?" I asked, stepping closer with arms outstretched. Daniel hesitated, glancing down the hallway. "Maybe wait until Victoria comes in. She's very particular about the handoff routine." I lowered my arms, the hurt barely hidden in my expression. I had raised a child of my own, had worked with children for decades at the library, yet somehow I needed permission to hold my own granddaughter. I silently reached for the photo albums I had brought instead, a silent offering of family memories, hoping it would be enough. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, her workout clothes as pristine as her carefully composed smile. "Margaret, you're early," she remarked, eyeing the expensive watch on her wrist. "I wasn't early," I replied, trying not to sound defensive. "I arrived exactly at 10, as I always do on Thursdays." I had learned to pick my battles with Victoria. "Good morning, Victoria." I brought scones and preserves. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's so thoughtful, but we're actually on a gluten-free trial this month. Daniel's digestive issues, you know, and his wellness coach thinks it might be related to wheat." Daniel nodded along with her words, but I knew he hadn't mentioned any digestive issues earlier in the week when we spoke. "Thanks anyway, Mom," he said absently. Victoria expertly picked up Emma, and the baby quieted immediately in her arms. I just prepared a bottle in the warmer, she said, her voice as smooth as always. Perfect timing, sweet girl. I watched the scene unfold, silently offering to feed Emma. But Victoria's smile tightened. That's okay. We have a very specific feeding position that helps with her digestion. The lactation consultant was very clear about it. The words stung. Bottle positions hadn't been this complicated when Daniel was a baby. Back then, I fed him however I could to keep him from crying, to keep myself from collapsing from exhaustion. Now, I was being judged for my knowledge, as if decades of experience meant nothing. How are things at the community center? Daniel asked, his attention once again focused on his phone as he typed out a response to some work email. I answered without hesitation. It's going well. We just received a grant to expand the children's section. I'm helping set up a new storytelling corner. That sounds nice, Daniel said, his voice distracted. You should be careful not to overcommit though, Victoria added, her tone soft but firm. At your age, it's important to pace yourself. I bit my tongue, the words at my age, hanging in the air like an insult. At my age, I shouldn't be treated like a child. I shouldn't have to justify every action, every decision I made. I was 65, in good health aside from the slight tremor, and yet Victoria seemed to think I was one step away from a nursing home. I managed just fine, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Actually, the center director asked if I'd be interested in coordinating the summer reading program this year. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a lot of responsibility, she said, not looking up from Emma. You know, my mother joined that seniors walking group at Evergreen Gardens. She loves it. Much less stressful than organizing programs. I forced a smile. I didn't need to walk with a group of strangers to fill my days. I enjoy staying busy, I replied. And working with children keeps me young. Victoria's smile was tight as she adjusted Emma in her arms. The baby gave me a gummy smile, and my heart swelled with affection. I approached slowly, holding out my arms again. May I hold her now? I asked, my voice soft. Victoria hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might deny me again. Then she lowered her gaze to my hands. I realized I was nervously fidgeting with my wedding band, an old habit I had never shaken. It was a habit I had kept long after Gregory and I divorced, a comfort that had never left me. Actually, Margaret, I've been meaning to talk to you about something, Victoria said, her voice turning careful, like she was about to deliver a performance. I've noticed your hands seem a bit unsteady lately. The tremor is getting worse. Have you considered seeing a specialist? I froze. Anger flared in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. My doctor says it's normal. Victoria's tone was condescending, as if she knew better than my doctor. General practitioners don't always catch everything, she said, glancing toward Daniel. Daniel's client, Raymond. You remember him, honey? He's a neurologist. He said these things can sometimes indicate underlying issues. I'm perfectly healthy, I insisted, my voice tighter than I intended. Mom, nobody's saying you're not, Daniel interjected quickly. We're just suggesting a second opinion. I stood up, suddenly needing to leave. I think I should go. Mom, you just got here, Daniel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I could tell that he was more concerned about the unease in the room than about my feelings. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. I've brought the photo albums, I said, gesturing to my bag. And the scones. If you change your mind about the gluten, I'll see myself out. Daniel followed me to the door, his face flushed with guilt. Mom, don't be like that. Like what, Daniel? I turned to face him. Upset because I'm apparently too decrepit to hold my own granddaughter? Upset that you and Victoria have discussions about my health behind my back? Upset that you sit silently while she treats me like I'm incompetent? Daniel's face softened, and I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. That's not how it is, he said weakly. Isn't it? I challenged him. When was the last time you stood up for me? When was the last time you told Victoria that maybe, just maybe, I might know something about raising a child? After all, I raised you. Victoria called from behind him. We're only thinking of Emma. I looked past Daniel to her. No, you're thinking of yourselves, and what makes you comfortable. Emma was perfectly content in my arms. You're being emotional, Victoria said dismissively, her tone cold. That was when I saw it. The same look Gregory had given me when he thought I was being difficult, a mixture of condescension and impatience. Daniel had inherited that look, and now he was wearing it too. I'll see you next Thursday, I said flatly, walking out without looking back. As I drove home that day, the familiar sting of rejection from Daniel and Victoria weighed heavily on my chest. The mix of frustration and hurt clouded my thoughts, but I refused to let it consume me. Instead, I focused on something else. My newfound sense of determination. The past few weeks had made one thing clear: I had become invisible to them. It wasn't just the tremor that had triggered their doubts about my capabilities. It was the subtle, insidious way they dismissed me. As if the years of wisdom I'd accumulated and the life I'd lived didn't matter anymore, merely because I was now a grandmother of a certain age. I turned onto the street that led to my house and parked in the driveway, the warmth of the sun just starting to set. The house was quiet, and as I stepped inside, I took a moment to simply breathe. This place had been my refuge for years, a space where I could be myself without worrying about anyone's judgment. I walked into the kitchen, where my phone buzzed. It was a message from Walter, the financial advisor I'd been in touch with regarding Emma's trust. Maggie, I have the draft of the trust documents ready for your review. They'll give you a solid foundation for what we've discussed. Feel free to let me know your thoughts whenever you're ready. The trust had been set up years ago to ensure Emma's future was secure, especially with her parents both being busy professionals. But now, as the situation with Daniel and Victoria had deteriorated, the idea of having some sort of control, some way to guarantee my involvement, felt both empowering and unsettling. I opened the file Walter had sent, the legal jargon a stark contrast to the personal weight I was attaching to every word. As I read through the options, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the right decision. Changing the trust seemed like a last resort, but it would give me some leverage, something tangible to ensure that I wasn't sidelined in Emma's life. But I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. Instead, I closed the document, determined to focus on something more positive: my own personal growth. The next morning, I felt a small spark of excitement as I prepared for my first day at Turning Pages, the local bookstore. It wasn't a high-profile job, but it was a start. The idea of immersing myself in books again, recommending titles, helping people find what they needed, it felt right. For so long I had defined myself by my career as a librarian, and after retirement, I had allowed myself to shrink in the shadows of my son's life, retreating into the role of a dutiful grandmother. But I wasn't ready to disappear. I dressed carefully, choosing a comfortable yet professional outfit: dark jeans, a soft blue cardigan over a white blouse, and practical flats. I finished by pinning my silver hair into a neat twist at the nape of my neck. I wanted to feel capable, not like someone clinging to the past, but someone living fully in the present. When I arrived at Turning Pages, the bookstore was bustling with early morning customers. Martha, the owner, greeted me with a warm smile and quickly guided me through the store's operations. We went over the inventory system, register procedures, and the daily tasks that would become second nature to me over time. The morning passed quickly. I helped an elderly gentleman find a biography of Winston Churchill, assisted a mother with finding picture books for her truck-obsessed toddler, and reorganized the displays for the upcoming summer reading season. It was a rhythm I knew well, connecting people with stories, just like I had done for so many years as a librarian. Martha and I spent a quiet moment around 11 a.m. at the register, chatting about the customers. "You're a natural, Maggie," she said with a smile. "The customers already love you. I can tell." "It feels good to be back around books," I said, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over me. Martha leaned closer, her voice lowering slightly. "Victoria Reynolds was just on the phone ordering a book. When I mentioned you'd started working here, she seemed surprised. I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice neutral. Victoria? Really? Yeah, Martha continued, her voice still hushed. She asked a lot of questions about your schedule, whether you were just filling in temporarily or if it was a regular thing. I hope I didn't overstep by mentioning you'd be here Tuesday and Thursday mornings, plus occasional Saturdays. Not at all, I replied, curious about her sudden interest. She's my daughter-in-law. Martha nodded. Ah, that explains it. She ordered parenting books before, but very particular about what she wants. Some of the books are the ones you use to recommend at the library. I forced a smile. That sounds like her. The conversation shifted back to the store, but a nagging thought lingered in my mind. Why was Victoria so focused on my schedule? What did she expect from me? I had been careful not to push back too hard against her or Daniel's wishes, but I was beginning to see cracks in their control. This job, this new chapter, felt like a small but significant step in reclaiming myself. The following weekend passed in a quiet blur of work and personal reflection. I spent my Saturday morning tending to my garden, enjoying the simple satisfaction of planting new flowers and preparing the soil for summer. The rhythmic motion of digging, planting, and watering was meditative, and I found it grounding. In the afternoon, I visited the community center to finalize the preparations for the new children's reading corner. Marcus, the director, was thrilled with the colorful bookshelves and the comfortable floor cushions we'd selected. This is going to make such a difference for the after-school program, he said with enthusiasm. Having a dedicated reading area will encourage the kids to see books as something special, not just educational. I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me. Books had always been more than educational tools. They were portals to other worlds. I was excited to be a part of this new initiative, knowing that it was a space I could help shape. After the community center, I attended the early service at Lakeside Community Church, where I had been a member for decades. The coffee hour afterward was always a time for casual conversations with friends and acquaintances, but today felt different. When people asked about Emma, I found myself editing my responses, carefully avoiding any mention of the tension with Daniel and Victoria. Judith Morgan, a longtime friend from the library board, pulled me aside. Maggie, are you okay? You seem preoccupied. I hesitated before answering, unsure how much to reveal. But Judith had known me for over 30 years, and I trusted her. Just some family challenges, I admitted, my voice a bit softer. Daniel and Victoria are particular about how involved I should be with Emma. Judith nodded sympathetically. Ah, the modern parent dilemma. My daughter Rebecca barely let me hold my grandson until he was walking. Now she begs me to babysit every weekend. I smiled faintly, intrigued. How did you handle it? Patience and selective memory loss, Judith said with a wink. I conveniently forgot all their rules when they weren't looking, but never let them catch me. And I kept myself busy enough that when they did need help, I wasn't sitting by the phone, desperate for their call. That sounded like wisdom I could use. I'm starting to do the same thing, I confessed. Taking on new responsibilities, building my own life. Judith's eyes sparkled. Nothing makes you more attractive to busy parents than being too occupied to be at their beck and call. Suddenly, they remember all the free childcare they're missing out on. I chuckled, the weight of the situation lifting slightly. It wasn't just me. Many grandparents navigated the same challenges. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable. Later that evening, as I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, I reflected on the changes that had already started to take shape. I had made a decision, and I was taking steps to create a life that didn't revolve around Daniel and Victoria's expectations. The new job at Turning Pages, the summer program at the community center, the sense of purpose. I was rebuilding my identity, not just for me, but for Emma as well. I hadn't made any final decisions about Emma's trust, but I had more clarity than before. The changes in my relationship with Daniel and Victoria were small, but they were real. They weren't perfect, and I wasn't under any illusion that everything was suddenly fine, But I had taken a stand. I was no longer willing to let myself be invisible. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over my garden, I felt a sense of peace. I still had much to navigate with Daniel and Victoria, but I had reclaimed my right to be a vital, engaged part of Emma's life, and that was a victory in itself. The week flew by in a whirlwind of activity. My schedule at the bookstore had become more comfortable, and I had already found a rhythm in my role as storytime leader. The children's laughter during my Saturday sessions filled me with a deep sense of fulfillment. I hadn't expected to find such joy in reading aloud again, but it turned out I still had a knack for engaging children, bringing characters to life with voices and actions. Martha, the bookstore owner, continued to praise my efforts, saying that the children's storytime had become one of their most popular events. It felt good to be appreciated for something I was doing just for the love of it, not because it was expected or tied to any family obligations. The community center's summer reading program was taking shape as well. Marcus and I had brainstormed ideas, and I was becoming more involved in organizing the logistics. It was rewarding to know that I was helping children who might not have access to books at home discover the magic of reading. But through it all, one thought lingered in the back of my mind: the trust. I had initially considered changing Emma's trust as a way to regain some control over my relationship with Daniel and Victoria. But now, with everything that had been happening, my work, my new life, and the subtle shifts in their attitudes, something was changing within me as well. The trust had originally been designed to provide financial security for Emma's future, ensuring that her education would be well supported no matter what happened in her parents' lives. But as I spent more time with her, as I began to build a more meaningful relationship with Daniel and Victoria, the weight of that financial leverage seemed to fade. What mattered most wasn't the money, it was the connection. I had reached a point where I realized the trust didn't need to be my primary tool for asserting my place in Emma's life. I didn't need to use it to punish or manipulate, but rather to build something lasting, a legacy of love, wisdom, and presence. The following Thursday morning, I arrived at Daniel and Victoria's house for my regular visit, but today felt different. There was a shift in the air, something lighter, more genuine. Victoria greeted me at the door with a warm smile and invited me inside, offering coffee immediately. "Thank you for coming," she said as we settled into the kitchen. "Emma's been asking for you all morning. I think she missed you." I smiled, feeling a familiar sense of pride as Emma reached for me from her high chair, giggling as I lifted her into my arms. The connection between us was stronger now, unspoken but undeniable. "We've been thinking," Victoria continued a bit hesitantly, "that maybe we should make these visits a more regular thing, having you around once or twice a week for playtime, for Emma's sake. We want her to have a close relationship with you, Maggie." My heart swelled. For so long, I had waited for this acknowledgement, and now, finally, it was here. "I'd love that," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion welling inside me. "We also wanted to ask if you'd be willing to read a passage during Emma's baptism next month," Daniel added, entering the room. "We'd really like you to be involved." The simple request took me by surprise, but in the best way possible. "Of course," I said softly, feeling an unexpected warmth fill my chest. "I'd be honored." For the first time in months, I felt that the walls between us, me and Victoria, me and Daniel, were starting to crumble. This wasn't just about a grandmother's role anymore. It was about a family coming together, acknowledging the value I brought to the table, and inviting me into Emma's life in a meaningful way. Later that week, I had a meeting with Walter and Sophia Patel to finalize Emma's trust. I'd spent hours reviewing the documents, and although I still wanted to ensure Emma's financial future was secure, I felt a deep sense of clarity as I sat down with them. "I've thought long and hard about what I want for Emma," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "And I've decided that what matters most is not just her financial security, but her emotional well-being and connection with family. I want to make sure she understands the value of relationships as much as the value of money." Walter nodded approvingly, and Sophia smiled, her expression warm and understanding. "That's exactly the kind of thoughtful approach we've always aimed for in this trust," Sophia said. "We can adjust the terms to include family involvement alongside the educational funds. That way, Emma will have a strong foundation in both areas. I nodded, feeling at peace with the decision. This wasn't just about safeguarding Emma's future, it was about ensuring she would grow up with a sense of family, of love, and of belonging. As we reviewed the final documents, I felt the weight of the past months lifting. The trust had always been a tool for control, but now it was something deeper, a legacy of love and connection across generations. The following Saturday morning, I hosted another story time at Turning Pages. Emma attended, sitting on Daniel's lap as I read aloud to the children. I noticed Victoria watching from the sidelines, her expression softening as she observed the ease with which Emma responded to me. Afterward, as I cleaned up, Victoria approached me, her tone warmer than usual. "You're really amazing with the kids, Maggie. I've been thinking, when Emma starts walking more steadily, maybe we could take her to the library for some of the programs there." I smiled, my heart full. "I'd love that," I said. "I'd be honored to take her." Victoria looked thoughtful for a moment before speaking again. "I've also been thinking about starting a family dinner tradition, just a simple meal once a week. It's been hard to juggle everything with work and the baby, but we'd love to have you over regularly. Maybe Sunday evenings." The request, so simple and sincere, hit me harder than I expected. For the first time in a long while, it felt like I was being included, not as an obligation or a helper, but as an equal part of the family. "I'd love that," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion in my chest. "It sounds perfect." The following Sunday evening arrived, and as I prepared my rosemary bread and a small gift for Emma, I felt the weight of the changes that had taken place over the past few months. The invitations, the small but significant shifts in Daniel and Victoria's attitudes, and the quiet but steady reclamation of my place in their lives, it all felt right. When I arrived at their home, Emma greeted me with a delighted squeal, reaching out for me. Victoria and Daniel worked side by side in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. It was everything I had hoped for, a family, united in love and care for each other. After dinner, as we sat together in the living room, Daniel turned to me with a soft smile. "Mom, I've been meaning to tell you. Watching you with Emma has made me realize how much I missed out on when I was younger. The way you always made time for me, the way you taught me to love books and stories. I want Emma to have that too." The vulnerability in his words touched me deeply. "Those memories are special to me too, Daniel," I said quietly. "And I want to pass them on to her. I want to be there for her, just as I was there for you." Victoria, sitting beside us, added softly, "And we want that too. We want Emma to have a close relationship with you, Maggie." The sincerity in her voice, in both of them, brought tears to my eyes. This was what I had hoped for, not just an occasional role as a grandmother, but as an active and valued member of their lives. As we sat there, watching Emma play with her new book, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had made it through the hardest part. And in doing so, I had not only reclaimed my place in their world, but I had also found a new kind of trust, the kind that couldn't be bought or controlled, but that was built on respect, love, and mutual understanding. As I drove home that evening, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the road, I realized that the greatest gift I could give Emma wasn't just financial security. It was the example of a woman who refused to be diminished by age or circumstance, who reinvented herself in her later years and found a new place in the world, not through demands, but through living fully and authentically. That was the legacy I wanted to leave her. A legacy of love, connection, and resilience. The weeks that followed were a blend of joy and reflection, a recalibration of my identity as a mother, grandmother, and independent woman. My life, once rooted in the quiet expectations of family and home, had grown into something more vibrant, more dynamic. I was busier than I had ever been, but it felt purposeful in ways I hadn't anticipated. At the bookstore, I had become a fixture, well known by the regulars, beloved by the children who attended story time. The Saturday morning sessions had gained a loyal following, and I had even begun to experiment with a few new reading ideas, incorporating interactive activities to engage the children's imaginations further. Emma, now more mobile, was often in attendance, sitting on Daniel's lap or crawling excitedly among the piles of books. Seeing her so engaged with the world of stories filled me with a sense of accomplishment, knowing I was planting seeds in her mind for a lifelong love of books. Victoria had continued to grow more comfortable with my involvement in Emma's life. The weekly family dinners had become a cherished tradition, something that brought us all together in a way we hadn't experienced before. There were no more awkward silences or clipped conversations. Instead, our evenings were filled with laughter, shared stories, and a palpable sense of belonging. One evening after dinner, as Daniel and I sat in the living room with Emma, the quiet of the night settled over us. The familiar hum of the house, Victoria in the kitchen, tidying up, and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking, felt like peace had finally found its place in our family. It was an easy, comfortable peace, one that wasn't forced or fraught with tension. I could sense how much we had all grown, not just as individuals, but as a family. Emma's laughter, now louder and more confident, was the soundtrack of my life. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Daniel pulled me aside in the kitchen. He looked at me, his face softened by the light from the overhead lamp. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about the trust. Victoria and we've realized that it's not about the money. It's about you being part of Emma's life. And we want to make sure that you always have a place in her world, no matter what." The words, spoken so simply and directly, struck me with the force of an unspoken truth. It wasn't about using money or power as leverage. It was about creating a legacy of love, connection, and presence. They had begun to understand that, as I had, and that understanding had changed everything. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "It's about family. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of Emma's life in such a real way." Daniel gave me a small, almost shy smile. "We've been thinking about the baptism," he said, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "We'd like you to help choose the scriptures, if that's something you'd like to do. And," he paused, as if weighing the importance of what he was about to say, "we'd love it if you could be the one to baptize her." The words were a simple request, but they carried so much weight. It wasn't just about the act of baptizing her. It was about the deep sense of belonging they were offering me, an invitation to play a crucial role in the spiritual and emotional fabric of Emma's life. It was everything I had hoped for, but in a form I hadn't quite expected. "I would be honored," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Daniel. This means more to me than you can imagine." The baptism day arrived, bright and early on a Sunday morning. The church was small, intimate, and filled with the quiet murmur of well-wishers as we gathered. It was a day that had been years in the making, one that felt like a culmination of everything I had fought for, everything I had hoped for. Victoria and Daniel, as nervous as new parents always are, looked radiant in their simple, elegant clothes. Emma, dressed in the same lace christening gown that had been passed down through generations, looked like a tiny angel as I held her in my arms, her wide eyes gazing up at me with trust. The same gown that had once swaddled Daniel now graced his daughter. The history, the continuity, the love embedded in those delicate lace threads was a bond that stretched across generations, uniting us all. As I read the scripture, my voice steady and clear, I felt the weight of the moment sink in. This wasn't just about a ceremony, it was about the new traditions we were building, the connections we were strengthening, and the family we were becoming. When the time came to baptize Emma, I gently poured the water over her forehead, feeling the significance of the act wash over me. I whispered a prayer, one for her future, her health, and her happiness. But I also whispered a prayer for all of us, Daniel, Victoria, and me, that we would continue to grow closer, to remain open and connected, no matter the challenges ahead. As we gathered for lunch after the ceremony, Victoria and Daniel exchanged glances, their faces filled with quiet pride. "This was perfect," Victoria said, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so glad we did this." I smiled, my heart full. "Me too. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful to be part of Emma's life in this way." Daniel, who had been unusually quiet during the meal, spoke up. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been thinking a lot about the past few months. How much things have changed. You've always been there for me. For us. But I don't think I fully realized how much you had to give until now. You've shown me what it means to be a mother, a grandmother, and a person with purpose. I want you to know that I see you. And I respect you more than I ever have. Tears welled up in my eyes at his words. It wasn't the apology I had once hoped for, but it was something more meaningful. Recognition, acknowledgement, and an invitation to continue being part of their world in a new, more profound way. I'm so proud of you, Daniel, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm proud of what we've built together as a family. As the meal continued and Emma played happily with her toys, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. My role in their lives had evolved, and with it I had evolved too. I was no longer just a mother or grandmother defined by the roles assigned to me. I was a woman living fully and authentically, not merely reacting to what others expected of me, but carving out my own path. The trust fund, which had once been a tool for control, was now just a small part of the legacy I was building for Emma. It wasn't about securing her financial future at the cost of emotional connection. It was about creating opportunities for her to grow up surrounded by love, stories, and the sense that family was a bond worth nurturing. The changes to the trust reflected that. It was a legacy that spoke not just to her future, but to the love and values that would shape her. As I left that evening, the sky painted in hues of deep blue and purple, I realized that what I had built with Daniel and Victoria was more than just a relationship. It was a bridge, one that spanned the distance of years, of misunderstandings, and of expectations. It was a bridge that led to a new kind of trust, the kind that couldn't be quantified by money or control, but by love, by shared experiences, and by the recognition that family is built on respect, not power. And as Emma took her first wobbly steps that evening, I knew that whatever the future held, I would be there, every step of the way. The weeks following Emma's baptism marked a peaceful transition in our family. The weekly dinners continued, each one bringing us closer, cementing our newfound understanding. There was a warmth in the house now, a comfort that was built on small gestures. Daniel's quiet appreciation, Victoria's growing willingness to trust me, and Emma's innocent joy every time I walked through the door. But it wasn't just the dinners that were changing. It was everything. The trust fund was no longer a point of tension. When I made the decision to revise the trust, I did it carefully, thoughtfully, and with the understanding that the financial structure of Emma's future would not define the depth of my relationship with her. The changes were subtle, an increased focus on experiences, shared moments, and values that would encourage Emma to embrace the world with an open heart, just as I had tried to do in my own life. In many ways, the trust fund became a reflection of my evolution, too. I had grown, not just in terms of my family's perception of me, but in my own sense of self. I was no longer the woman who merely existed in the background. I had found a way to integrate my past into the present, using the lessons of my life to shape the future, not just for Emma, but for myself as well. The bookshop had been my first step toward rediscovering myself. What had begun as a simple job to fill my days had transformed into a passion. Every day I found joy in the books I shelved, the stories I recommended, and the connections I made with customers. I had built relationships there too, like with Martha, who had become not just a colleague, but a true friend. She was a steady presence in my life, always there to offer advice or encouragement, reminding me of the importance of community, of belonging. One Saturday morning, after a particularly lively story time, Martha came up to me with an excited gleam in her eyes. "Maggie," she said, "I've been thinking. You've got such a gift with kids. Why don't you consider writing your own book? A children's book, based on the stories you tell every week. You could include some of your own experiences, some of your childhood memories. It would be magical." The suggestion struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had never thought about it before, but in that moment, I realized how much I had to give, how many stories I had stored in my heart, waiting for the right moment to be shared. I had spent my life telling stories to Daniel, to children at the library, to Emma during our weekly visits, but never thought about sharing them with the world. I had always seen myself as a storyteller, but never as a creator of stories in the formal sense. That afternoon, as I walked home, the idea took root in my mind. I would write a children's book. Something that would combine the magic of childhood with the lessons of my own experiences. It would be a tribute to my relationship with Daniel, to my experiences as a mother and grandmother, and most importantly, to Emma's future. The idea felt liberating. It wasn't just a creative endeavor. It was a legacy. The kind of legacy that would live on, long after I was gone, just like the stories I had shared with Daniel and now with Emma. As I sat down to write the first few words that night, the pen felt heavier than it ever had before. I was not just writing a book. I was writing a part of myself into existence, creating something that would live on in Emma's hands, in the hands of other children who would read it, and perhaps most importantly, in the hearts of the people I loved. The following week, I arrived at Daniel and Victoria's house earlier than usual, eager to share the progress I had made with my book idea. Emma's giggle echoed from the living room as I walked in, and I couldn't help but smile. There was a lightness in the air, an energy that felt new, like the house itself had become a place of hope and possibility. I set my bag down by the door and went into the living room, where Emma was sitting on the floor, playing with a new set of colorful blocks. Victoria looked up as I entered, a soft smile on her face. "Good morning, Maggie," she said, her voice as warm as ever. "How was the bookshop?" "Busy," I replied, settling beside Emma. "But something else happened. I've decided to write a children's book. Something that reflects the stories I've been telling you all these weeks." Victoria's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and genuine curiosity. "A book? Really? That's incredible. I had no idea you were thinking about something like that." I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. "It just came to me. I think it's time. I've got so many stories to share, and I want Emma to have something that's hers, something that will remind her of me, of our family's traditions." Daniel, who had been in the kitchen, walked in just then, catching the tail end of our conversation. "What's this about a book?" he asked, his face lighting up with interest. "I'm writing one," I said simply. "I've already got the outline started." He looked genuinely impressed. "That's amazing, Mom. I can't wait to read it. I think Emma will love it when she's old enough." It was moments like this, small, seemingly insignificant conversations, that solidified the changes I had worked so hard to make. This was no longer about proving myself. It was about sharing my passions, my experiences, and my love for the family in ways that were both deep and enduring. The weeks went by, and I continued to make progress on the book. Emma's first birthday was fast approaching, and with it, a new milestone in her life. As I sat down to work, I reflected on the past year. Everything had shifted. From the tensions of early months to the deeper understanding that had formed, the family dynamic had transformed. At the birthday party, surrounded by laughter, cake, and tiny hands reaching for presents, I realized that this was what I had fought for. Not just a place in Emma's life, but a seat at the table in a life that I had worked so hard to make meaningful. The legacy I was creating wasn't just in the trust documents, but in the love, stories, and memories I was building for her, for all of us. And as I watched Emma blow out her first birthday candles, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Living fully, living authentically.